Hello, my name's Brittany Garcia. I work for VMware by Broadcom as a cloud solution architect, and this video is going to be all about vSAN. So AVS uses vSAN as its primary storage cluster. You don't have to be using vSAN on-prem, and it's pretty easy to understand how it works in AVS if you haven't used it before. So AVS is a hyperconverged solution. So that means that all of our hosts are giving us compute, memory, and also storage. vSAN is a bit different than your typical storage in that it abstracts and aggregates locally attached disks in a vSphere cluster to create a storage solution that can be provisioned and managed from vCenter. So the hosts that come with AVS use NVMe drives, and we aggregate all of the drives that come within the cluster and present this to the cluster as a single data store, and that single data store is called vSAN. So the more hosts you have, the more storage you're going to have available, and you can create your storage policies and get these applied at the VM level, including things like your RAID configuration and failures to tolerate. vSAN supports RAID 0, 1, 5, and 6, and vSAN data at rest encryption, which basically means if a drive goes bad and Microsoft replaces it, data at rest guarantees that that data is encrypted. I do have a slide to quickly show you the different tiers of storage that you would have available. I'll share that quickly, and then I'll kind of move on from that. You can pause the screen here if you'd like to take a look at this a little bit more. And of course, talk to your sales rep or your solution architect about the different tiers of clusters, because some tiers are available in some regions and some are not available in some regions. So just make sure you speak with either Microsoft or VMware about which one will apply to the region you're in. Now I want to move on to a storage policy. What is a storage policy? If you know, awesome, you can skip to the next part of this video. If you don't, I'll go over it at a high level. So a storage policy is a set of rules and guidelines that govern how digital data is stored, managed, and protected in an organization. A storage policy can include things like RAID, failures to tolerate, and if you're familiar with vSphere, choosing thick or thin provisioning. However, in the case of vSAN for AVS, we will only be able to use thin provisioning. So we know what vSAN is now at a high level. We know what a storage policy is. Let's look at how they apply in AVS. The default storage policy in AVS is set to RAID 1, failures to tolerate 1. So notice you need a minimum of 3 hosts for that, and the minimum number of hosts you can have with AVS is 3 for that exact reason. Unless you adjust the storage policy, your cluster will grow with this configuration, and the default storage policy will be applied to the workload VMs. In a 3-host cluster, failures to tolerate 1 accommodates a single host failure. Microsoft governs failures regularly and replaces the hardware when events are detected from an operations perspective. I'm going to attach a link to the top right corner for more info about storage policies for AVS. The listed RAID levels and their failures to tolerate are aligned with the minimum host levels on the far right column. And these minimum host numbers align with Microsoft's SLA. If you want more information on what that means, I will drop another link in the top right corner of this video. Now let's go to the Azure portal. I'm going to take you there and we'll take a look at how to change a storage policy. And I'll also drop a link to a Microsoft Learn page so you can read on how to configure your own storage policy if you want. So to change your storage policy, you're going to want to go to your Azure portal. So I'm in a demo environment. Yours will, obviously look like your environment, but the left-hand column is going to be relatively the same. So I'll have you scroll down to Run command, which is under the Operations section. So we'll click on that. And then we'll click on Microsoft AVS Management. In Microsoft AVS Management, you have a few things that end in storage policies. So I'll kind of quickly walk us through. So the run command Get-StoragePolicy is a way to list the vSAN-based storage policies available to set a VM. So we have Set-VMStoragePolicy. This is the commandlet to modify vSAN-based storage policies on a default cluster, also on an individual VM or a group of VMs. To set a storage policy on all VMs in a location, we would go to Set-LocationStoragePolicy to modify vSAN-based storage policies on all VMs in a location where a location is the name of a cluster, resource pool, or a folder. To specify storage policy for a cluster, we're going to click on Set-ClusterDefaultStoragePolicy to specify default storage policy for a cluster. And then to create a custom AVS storage policy, we're going to go find New-AVSStoragePolicy to create or overwrite an existing policy. So this function creates a new or overwrites an existing vSphere storage policy. And then I think the only other thing we should talk about is removing a storage policy. So this is the commandlet to specify default storage policy for a cluster to remove a policy. So again, I'm going to have a link which kind of goes through what some of these run commands do in a little bit more detail. So I'll add that link to the top right corner. And if you have other questions, drop them in the comments and, we can get to them and add to this video. But for now, I just wanted to cover the basics and I hope you enjoyed the video.